Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another exciting lecture by your favorite speaker, Dr. Ronald J. Brown. Our topic for today is the famous Mexican holiday of the Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. In November 1st, 2022, this was celebrated. I've been in Mexico many times for the celebration of the Day of the Dead. As you can see from a picture, this is in my hotel lobby, and you see a skeleton all decked up and riding a bicycle covered with flowers, and especially the yellow marigold. So today we're going to discover what exactly is the Day of the Dead all about. This wonderful Mexican holiday celebrating the dead. Our outline is on the left. Number one, the power of holidays. Holidays have meaning. They are present in every society and every religion and every culture. So what is the power of holidays, the function of holidays? Next, the unique Mexican approach to death. Mass killing of millions of Mexicans by the Spanish from war and disease. Up until today, war, crimes of passion, gangs, drug gangs, COVID, monkeypox, who knows what's next, kangaroo pox or an Ebola pandemic. But death has been part of Mexican history and is more pronounced in their culture than probably any other culture. Point three is the unique Catholic approach to death, where there's no wall between heaven and earth. They blend, they merge, they interact. And then the Day of the Dead, the origin of the Day of the Dead, Day of the Dead in popular culture, and then how the Day of the Dead has gone global. As Mexicans have migrated around the world by the millions, they have taken their culture with them and their Day of the Dead. So let's get started. Well, what are holidays all about? Why are they so important? Well, we all know the Mardi Gras of New Orleans and the various Mardi Gras throughout the Catholic world, and increasingly even among Catholics, such as in Bavaria and the Catholic areas of Germany. Well, holidays, first and foremost, are fun and food. Nobody would go to a holiday which was not fun. Nobody would go to a holiday where there was no food. So fun and food are sort of the popular attractions. Come to the Mardi Gras. Come to the breaking of the fast at the end of Ramadan. Come to a 4th of July party. Come to a Thanksgiving dinner. All of these holidays are marked by fun and food. Well, then what happens? Once you got the people all gathered together and they're eating and drinking and having fun and dancing, well, then what is another aspect of holidays? Well, every country, like every religion, has holidays. In fact, we celebrate the birthday of the Queen of England. We celebrate American independence with fun and happiness. Happy Thanksgiving. It's a wonderful, happy holiday for everybody except the turkey. Funerals. I was in Thailand for part of the funeral of King Rama IX when he died. And you saw the pageantry surrounding the funeral. So every country, every religion has its holidays. And these are the days when everybody suddenly celebrates. So Americans, whether you're Republican or Democrat, rich, poor, white, black, yellow, green, or anybody can celebrate the 4th of July. The fireworks are in the sky for everybody to enjoy. Queen's birthday, no matter what your political orientation is, when it is the Queen's birthday or the King's birthday, you celebrate it. So these are the holidays when people come together. They say, I am an American, I am British, I am Thai, I am Jewish, I am Catholic, I am Buddhist. So religion and national holidays are times of bringing people together, healing their differences. We have ethnic holidays. New York is famous for that. It's famous Fifth Avenue Parade, St. Patrick's, Salute to Israel, gay and lesbians, the German Von Steuben Parade. I mean, this is once again when you celebrate your ethnic heritage. Even if you are not Irish, well, you go to the fun of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Parades can be ethnic and they can be divisive. When there's a gay pride parade, you can be sure there are a lot of people protesting this lifestyle. When the Israelis march, you can be sure there are millions of Palestinian exiles scattered around the world. When they see the Israeli flag, they see racism, apartheid, and genocide. So holidays can be controversial. Holidays are also educational. When we see the picture of Jesus hanging on the cross, well, immediately you recount the story of Jesus's passion, his death, and of course, his resurrection. These are educational moments. The whole story of Moses separating the water. This is the Exodus. And this is the Passover meal story. In fact, during the Passover, a kid is called upon to ask the oldest person member at the table, why is this night different from all others? And then they tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. It is an educational experience. Ramadan, a holiday celebrating the revelation of the Quran directly from God to the angel Gabriel, and then from the angel Gabriel to the prophet Muhammad. So holidays are educational. They are teaching instruments. Thanksgiving. Well, who instituted Thanksgiving as a national holiday? Nobody other than Abraham Lincoln, using the Boston holiday of Thanksgiving as an instrument to unite all Americans. And in Thomas Nast's drawing of the first Thanksgiving, or not the first Thanksgiving, but a Thanksgiving dinner, you see it's not only North and South which are being united, but if you look at the people at the table, they're Chinese, they're Africans, there are Indians, there are Spanish, there are all kinds of people at the Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving. May Day, celebrating the Workers' Day. It's here. This is an international holiday, celebrated every place except the United States. Why don't we celebrate May Day in the United States? Well, what happened on May Day? There was a big strike in Chicago, the Haymarket strike. And rather than negotiate with the strikers, the governor and the mayor called in the National Guard, the police, and systematically massacred, imprisoned the leaders of the strike. Not a happy day in American history, but yet for the rest of the world, they say, what happened on May? What happened in that month that is of such importance? The Ramadan, celebrating the revelation of the Quran. Again, illustrating the power of holidays to unite Muslims. Even if you're not an observant Muslim, still you will be invited to another Muslim's house to break the fast at the end of the day or to celebrate the holiday at the end of Ramadan. So it once again brings you back into the gathering of Muslims. So holidays are powerful. They serve many functions. And if you're going to start a new religion or establish a new country or a new civilization, you're going to have to use the power of holidays. Well, on to the Day of the Dead in Mexico. Who would celebrate a holiday devoted to the dead? There must be a reason for this. Well, in Mexican history, human sacrifice has been very important, as it was in most every ancient religion. Before, humans passed from sacrificing humans to sacrificing animals. Now we don't even sacrifice animals in church, but we have the sacrifice of the Mass, commemorating Jesus's death. We have sacrifices where people give money, they make donations. So we have reinterpreted what sacrifices are. But in ancient times, it was human sacrifice. When you go to Mexico, you visit the pyramids and the ancient temples of the Aztecs and the Mayas. Death is everywhere. On the left, you see a wall of sculpted human skulls to commemorate all of those Aztecs and Mayas who were sacrificed by their priests to their gods. On the right, you see drawings of sacrificing humans, cutting them open, taking out the still beating heart, and offering it as a sacrifice to the various Aztec and Maya gods. In the middle, you see the famous Aztec and Maya football game. It's not football game. You don't hit the football with your foot. You hit it with your hip. Well, the winning team, their prize was they had the honor of being sacrificed to the gods. What a great victory it was. I mean, to offer your life for the good of the empire, the health of the kingdom, to guarantee that rains will come when they are supposed to. The plants will grow and produce corn and pumpkins and peppers and everything else that the society needed. So human blood was necessary for new life. Guarantee that the sun rises every morning. Guarantee the fertility of the crops. Guarantee that women will get pregnant and produce new Aztecs and Mayas. In fact, the Aztecs had a goddess of death, Michacacacatawatl. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it very good, but this was the Aztec goddess of death. Look at the skull. Even her crown is a string of human skulls. Between her hands is another skull. Well, the goddess was always presented as pregnant. In fact, that's what the skull between her hands represents. She is pregnant, and she is going to give birth to a new human. So death and new life were intermingled. There was no terrible separation between life and death. Death gave birth to new life, sort of a tree in the winter. It loses its leaves and it really looks dead. But then come the new spring and little shoots start coming out, new leaves come out, the grass comes up and starts turning green. Birds give birth to new babies sitting on eggs, and animals give birth. So from the death of winter comes new life. If you don't have the winter, you're not going to have spring. So this is sort of a natural approach to death and dying, which is very pronounced in the Aztec society, because if it didn't rain in the right time and in the right amount, the Aztecs and the Mayas and the other people of the Middle America would have died of starvation. Floods, too much rain, could have destroyed their farms and their towns. Diseases could ravage the people. Death was everywhere, and it had to be accepted, it had to be dealt with. And this belief that death, the blood of dead warriors, was necessary to ensure that new life would continue. Well, diseases were omnipresent in South America. And when the Spanish conquered the Mexicans and the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Zapotecs, and the Toltecs, and the other peoples of Central America, as well as South America, the Incas, they not only brought with them iron swords and guns and massacred probably millions of Central Americans, but they also brought another wave of death. And these were European diseases that the peoples of America had no resistance against. Influenza, mumps, smallpox, measles, cholera, typhus, malaria. And so, in addition to the warfare and the genocide of the Spanish, diseases, it is believed, destroyed half of the people of the Americas. From North America down to the bottom of South America, diseases ravaged. Well, Mexico continues to be a rather violent place. You have crime, the drug gangs, AIDS, dengue, most recently COVID-19 and monkeypox. This mass die-off so traumatized the ancient Aztecs that you see on the right, they would make drawings showing the progress of smallpox, where you see the person at the top on the right getting ill, the smallpox spreading across the person's body, vomiting, and then eventual death. So this was the ever presence of death and dying among the Spanish conquest. The Spanish conquered Mexico in the year 1519, and they brought with them genocide and plagues. The great painter Diego Rivera has painted many murals depicting the Spanish conquest. Well, in addition to massacring millions of Central Americans and North Americans, bringing horrendous diseases, the Spanish also forced the survivors to become Catholic. They would be rounded up, taken into a church, and baptized. They would be forced to wear clothes like we wear in the West. And this was a brutal destruction of the Aztec and the Maya cultures. They were forced to learn Spanish. They were forced to live in cities, and most of them were turned into slaves for the Spanish master race. Well, the Catholic Church also had a very well-developed culture of death. Go into many churches in South America and you'll see an altar, And inside the altar, you will see the mummified body of a priest or a bishop or a saint, because the Catholics firmly believe that when you die, you go to heaven, but you are not locked in heaven. You can communicate, you can interact with people here on earth. Well, the Mexicans converted very rapidly to Catholicism. And the reason was that the Catholic Church had death rituals. What was being celebrated on Good Friday, Holy Thursday, Ash Wednesday, all of these holidays were holidays that centered on death. Jesus entering Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, his arrest, his torture, his crowning with thorns, and eventually his death on the cross. And then on Easter Sunday, his coming back to life. So death was not something terrible to be feared. It was part of the natural order. Catholics taught that when you died, you were not disappearing into the dust, but you would be resurrected and you too would live on in heaven. Death was necessary to achieve eternal life in heaven. So the Aztecs and the Mayas said, well, you know, there's a lot of similarities between our beliefs in the transformative power of death, that death is necessary for new life to happen, and the Catholic traditions of Jesus dying and coming back to life. So when the Mexicans celebrate their famous Good Friday processions, Easter morning resurrections, these communicated this Catholic theology to the masses. On the right, you see a big procession going through the streets of Mexico. Every city reenacts the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. So even if the Indians couldn't read and write and hardly understood Spanish, the images in the church of dead people living on, dead people coming back to life in glory, this profoundly influenced them. Many scholars say that's why the peoples of South America converted so easily to Catholicism, because there were a lot of similarities. So Aztec culture merged with Catholicism. Well, this is as old as the hills. Very often, one religion influences the other. You can't understand Judaism without understanding the religion of the ancient Babylonians. Where did we get Adam and Eve? The Tower of Babel. Where did we get the flood, Noah? These are all ancient Babylonian stories that were incorporated into the Jewish Bible. So you see ancient Babylonian religions influencing Judaism. Where did Judaism get synagogues and rabbis? That was from the Persian Zoroastrian religion. So syncretism, that is the merging of religions. One religion influencing another is present in every religion. When Constantine the Great converted to Christianity, well, he introduced as much of Roman pagan culture into Christianity as he did the teachings of Jesus. The Christians adopted much from Judaism, but also adopted a lot from Greeks and a lot from Romans. So religions are constantly mixing, interacting, merging, separating, just like the Aztec religious beliefs and the Catholic religious beliefs just so easily merged and became one. Mardi Gras, before the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, in the beginning of the season of Lent leading up to Easter. Here again, celebrate life because we are all going to die. What happens on Ash Wednesday? The priest comes up and he put ashes on your forehead and reminds you from death you will have new life. Ashes to ashes, but this will be followed by a resurrection and a new life. So celebrate life as long as you have it, but don't fear death, because death simply leads to another type of life that is even more glorious than the one we have here on earth. Well, the Catholic tradition not only glorifies death as leading to something wonderful, but the Catholics have rich tradition of heaven and earth mingling. We tend to think of us here on earth and heaven way up there in the sky. Well, that's not the case. The Catholic Church and most religions don't have a strict barrier between what is up in the heavens and what is down here on earth. You read the Jewish Bible, the creation story. Well, that's God came down and created the earth and created humans. The story of Noah. Well, who told him to build the ark? But that was God who came down and told him. God spoke to Moses. God speaks to kings and princes. God constantly comes down. And if he's too lazy to come down, he'll send down Angel Gabriel to instruct the prophet Muhammad. In Catholic tradition, angels and saints, and even Jesus and Mary, his mother, have a long tradition of appearing to humans. Our Lady of Guadalupe was Mary who appeared to the ancient Aztecs as they were gradually becoming Christianized. So there's a lot of interplay. Jacob's ladder is a good example of the ladder that links heaven and earth. It's not a wall separating them. It is a ladder. God came down and gave Moses the 10 Commandments. Here again, we see that there is no wall between heaven and earth, but they mingle, they merge, they interact. Christianity and most religions are filled with angels, ghosts, devils, spirits, all kinds of strange creatures who are not earthly, they're not heavenly. We even have hell populated by a whole bunch of devils. Every person, Christians believe, has their guardian angel. Even in the Bible, there are all kinds of strange creatures that we still don't know what they are. The Giborim are the great mysterious creatures of the Bible. We don't know what they are. Even the rabbis have never decided what the Giborim and the Nephilim and these strange creatures which are referred to in the Bible. And so for Catholics and for most religions, but especially Catholics, the universe is populated not just by God up in heaven and humans here on earth, but a whole array of devils and angels and ghosts and spirits. So there is no barrier between heaven and earth. It's a sort of a two-way superhighway. People having visions of Mary and God and talking to Moses and getting gifts of laws from God, and the gods taking up people to heaven. So there's a two-way street. Catholics are especially fascinated by the communications between heaven and earth. In fact, Catholics believe that Jesus himself was half God and half human. Mary got pregnant from God, and so you have this mingling of heaven and earth in the form of a baby. This is called the incarnation. Catholics also believe that Mary did not die. She went to sleep and she was transported to heaven, where she is today in both human body and spirit. On the right, you see the Emperor of Japan. Japanese believe that the emperor is the son of the sun god, that the royal family has divine blood. Again, you see Jacob's ladder with everybody climbing up and coming down, linking heaven and earth. Catholics love visions, all kinds of apparitions of Mary. In fact, there's a woman here in New York who I got to know, who's now passed. This was Veronica Lucan out in Bayside, Queens, who had visions of Mary. She received messages from Jesus, from the saints, and she would have these giant meetings in Flushing Meadows Park where she would communicate with God, have conversations, give people messages directly from Mary or God or the saints to a particular person. I even received a message from heaven communicated by Veronica. And so these are very, very popular in Catholicism and still very, very vibrant. These haven't died out. As Veronica Lucan shows, Catholics are still having visions and communicating with gods and angels and saints. In fact, this whole world of intermediate figures, not quite earthly and not quite heavenly. Famous TV series Touched by an Angel. Here again, many people until today believe in these creatures of angels and devils. The CBS original Ghosts, a whole story of another category of strange creatures which are not earthly and not quite heavenly. We all know Ghostbusters. I mean, here again, showing that this belief in these strange entities, these strange beings, is still very, very strong in the world today. Well, that brings us to the Day of the Dead in Mexico. Once again, like good Aztecs and like good Catholics, the Mexicans during the Day of the Dead believe that the dead come back to earth in the form of spirits. And so people make ofrendas. These are the altars which you see in this picture on the left and at the bottom on the right, where you see a skeleton. The pictures of people who recently died are put on the ofrenda. And the Mexicans believe that the spirit or the ghost or the soul of that dead person comes back, and it wants to be entertained. It wants to see its children, its grandchildren. It wants to see the people it left behind, and it communicates with them. Pictures like in the upper right, you see people dressed in ancient Aztec costumes, but yet they're painted like ghosts. Once again, showing the interplay between the beliefs of the ancient Aztecs and the beliefs of the Catholic Church. And the parades and the ofrendas still show that this is very much alive today. Now, Halloween, which is the Day of the Dead, has a long history, even in pre-Christian history. It was celebrated as Samhain in the ancient peoples of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. And this was believed that it was the day when the spirits return and they want to be entertained. You have to make sacrifices because if they get angry, look at the angry face on that jack-o'-lantern there. If the spirits get angry, they are not to be joked with. They can ruin your day, if not your year or your life. So this belief in spirits of the dead interacting with humans is still very much alive, not only in Christianity and especially Catholicism, but in many religions. Well, the Day of the Dead is Halloween, All Saints and All Souls Day. Now, Catholics have a very strong belief, and it is not just a belief, it is something that Catholics must believe. And this is called the intercession of the saints. This, if you are a good Catholic, you must believe and accept this as a central part of Catholicism. And this intercession of the saints teaches that the saints are up in heaven, but they have direct contact with God, Jesus, with Mary, and the powers up in heaven. And the saints also listen to the prayers of people here on earth. So if I pray to a particular saint because I lost my car keys, and that saint hears my prayers and goes to Jesus and said, okay, well, Dr. Brown lost his car keys. Can you tell me where they are? Because you know everything. Well, God will tell the saint that I'm praying to where the car keys are. The saint will tell me where the car keys are. And I'll say, oh, yes, that's where they were. I knew they were somewhere. Now, this is a dramatic approach to intercession of the saints. But according to Catholic teaching, the saints have the power to give you gifts, to intercede with God, give you benefits. And so the saints are sort of a communication line between God and humans. I guess God's too busy up in heaven with all the things he has to worry about. And so the saints sort of, well, they have the time to listen to me, and then they communicate the message to Jesus or to Mary or whoever. And this is a part of Catholicism, which is still very, very much alive until today. The traditions of the Day of the Dead are many. One of them is this famous calavera, which is a sugar type candy made into the shape of a skull. And in fact, people put on face drawings to show that they too are skulls. Underneath the skin, there is the skull. And you go into stores and on the street, you see everybody selling these calaveras, these little chocolate, sugar candied skulls. You can also buy them in plastic, and then people fill them with candy. Once again, even the holiday, the Day of the Dead, has to have fun and food. It's not just a sadness, because if it was sadness, nobody would celebrate it. So it becomes fun. Every kid wants his little plastic bucket in the shape of a skull. Sort of reminds you of a jack-o'-lantern made out of pumpkins. So this is a very important tradition of the Day of the Dead. The marigold flower, the yellow flower, is the sacred flower of the Day of the Dead. It's also a sacred flower for many other religions, for Buddhism, for Hinduism. The marigold is a very important flower. In fact, in Mexico, they call it the flower of the dead. And even the Aztecs, you see the drawings below, very often portray yellow flowers. For example, on the shield of the guy in the middle, or on the right, you see the king with his cane, and you see the yellow flowers tucked into it. The marigold is believed to have medicinal powers, especially for all kinds of internal organ problems, liver, stomach, intestines. And it has been traditionally viewed as a powerful flower. So this is the flower which the Aztecs were venerated as the flower of the dead, having magical powers. And the Day of the Dead as well has maintained the marigold flower. During the Day of the Dead, many Mexicans have the tradition of going to the cemeteries. Well, if your grandfather died during the past year and there was a funeral and he is buried, Mexicans believe that grandfather's spirit is going to come back on the Day of the Dead. And he wants to be entertained. So if he liked a particular kind of tequila, you had to take the bottle with you to the cemetery. He liked a particular cigar or a particular type of music or loved to watch pretty girls dancing. Well, if you didn't provide grandfather's spirit with what he liked, you can be sure that you'll be struck down by COVID, or you will get sick, or your business will collapse, or there'll be an earthquake in Mexico that'll destroy your house. So you made sure you went to the cemetery, and the ghosts came back at night. That's why you'd have candles. You'd decorate the tombs with his picture, with his favorite tequila, with his cigars. You'd have a group come in to play his favorite music and watch the young girls dancing. Thousands of people would just throng into the cemeteries, everybody welcoming back the spirit of someone who had just died. And so once again, there's no barrier between heaven, where hopefully he is, and the earth, where he spent so many years. It's like a ladder, people climbing up and down all the time between heaven and earth. I often wonder what would happen if grandfather went to hell. Would he come back as a bad spirit or something? I'll have to ask some of my Mexican friends, because I'm sure there are a lot of grandfathers who didn't quite make it into heaven. So what happens if an evil spirit comes back? In people's homes, they put up ofrendas. And this commemorates a person who just died during the past year. Now, these have enjoyed a real popularity with especially COVID, where more and more people were putting ofrendas in their homes. AIDS is commemorated, cancer, accidents, drug gang killings, crime, the victims of crime. Once again, see on the left, putting up the picture of the person who you want to commemorate and bringing him all of his favorite foods, his favorite breads, decorating it with flowers. The one in the middle, you see the marigold flowers all over with people who had recently passed. On the right as well, you see all the decorations, the marigold flowers. A couple years ago, there was a blight. A blight is a disease that passes among plants. You can have a potato blight, when all the potato plants died in Ireland and half the population either died or migrated. Well, a couple years ago, there was a marigold blight, and all the marigolds of New York started dying. Well, I had a couple marigold plants on my balcony at that time, and I guess being isolated from fields and parks, my marigolds were doing quite well. Well, one of my friends saw them, and he offered to buy them from me because he wanted his marigolds. Well, the people up the street were Mexican. The people down the street were Hindus. And they began fighting. Who was going to buy my marigolds? I could have become rich and retired, but I ended up giving half to each person as a gift. Once again, the sacred, powerful, curing plant, the marigold. Another tradition is the pan de muerto, the bread of the dead. Special arrangement, as you can see, it has like a star shape, and then it has a central piece, very often surrounded by candied skulls and marigold flowers. Don't know exactly the origin of this pan de muerto. It could trace itself back to the Aztecs, but here again, it is just one of those traditions to celebrate the holiday. Can't have a holiday without fun and food. Many people even add an element of humor to the day, where, for example, on the left, you had some Mexican who did not like Donald Trump. And so on the Day of the Dead, the person wrote an obituary declaring that Donald Trump has died. And they wrote a description of his terrible life. In fact, in newspapers, people would write poems in honor of death. On the right, you see one of what they call the Calavera Literaria poems talking about death of a particular person. And you see the drawing of a beautiful lady with her big flowered hat, but yet a skeleton. This is a type of the Day of the Dead artwork that people like Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo were so much into. Now, the Day of the Dead also has a slightly different interpretation among a political and cultural movement called indigenismo. And this is a political theory or ideology which emphasizes the relationship between the nation state of Mexico and the indigenous Aztecs and Maya people, saying that even modern Mexico is deeply influenced by its ancient Aztec and Maya cultures and religions. And so you see the book on the right by Luis Villoro, talking about the great moments of indigenismo in Mexico, the more artistic expressions, historic expressions, where the culture, beliefs, traditions of the Aztecs and the Mayas strongly influenced the evolution of what we call today modern Mexican culture. Now, the Day of the Dead has really strongly influenced modern American, modern culture. For example, you see a Day of the Dead calendar. Every year it comes out, sort of like we do in January, but you'll have one showing a mariachi band made out of skeletons. And so here again, it is a great time for artists to become very creative. Popular movies devoted to the Day of the Dead. Here again, in popular culture, the Day of the Dead is not so religious and not so mystical. It can become sort of a scary approach where spirits who maybe aren't in heaven, but are in hell, they too come back to haunt the living. George Romero's Day of the Dead, the darkest day of horror the world has ever known, where the spirits come back and even inhabit living people. Mexico, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, of course, type of movie that Johnny Depp would just love. Once again, featuring these holidays in Mexico where the dead and the living interact again. Frida Kahlo, one of the great painters of Mexico, was very much fascinated by this blending of ancient Aztec and Maya culture, Catholic culture of the Spanish, and the modern world. She herself was half Aztec Indian and half European. Her father was a Hungarian Jew. That's where we get the name Kahlo. And even in her culture, the mixing of Europe and Catholicism and ancient Mexican, Aztec, and Maya religions strongly influenced her artwork, such as the skull surrounded by flowers on the right. Her husband was Diego Rivera. Here again, you see one of Diego Rivera's famous murals showing Frida in the middle with her big hat on and beautifully dressed, and little midget Diego on the left, going for a stroll. And you see how easily the women on the left and the gentlemen on the right with their top hats just go strolling through Alameda Park as if nothing is special. Nobody looks at the statue in the middle. Now, some people say that Frida is actually the woman on the left of this mysterious creature. Others say that that is actually the ghost of Frida. So here again, it's up to interpretation. But here it shows the artwork that has been created by this rather unique holiday. In fact, the Dia de los Muertos is also celebrated in New York City, which has a very large Mexican population. And here we see a sort of a New York Mexican approach to it, once again showing these skeletal hands and faces, but dressed to the nines in beautiful gowns. This was an exhibit that was at the Rockefeller Center, once again celebrating the holiday. Wherever Mexicans have gone, they have taken their Day of the Dead and other holidays with them. This is the current home of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, which formerly existed in a small chapel, but then it merged with an older church, St. Bernard's in Manhattan on 14th Street. And this is today the home of the Mexican community here in New York. And there's a big shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Mexican apparition of Mary. The altar is on the right, and you see under the crucifix at the top, you see a painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe, surrounded by various scenes from the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. Now, if you go to the church, you will not see celebrations of the Day of the Dead. The Catholic Church has considered this holiday a little bit too pagan for them. And so if you have Day of the Dead celebrations, it will be in museums such as the Museo de Barrio in Upper Manhattan on the East Side. You will see celebrations in people's homes. You will see decorations on the streets. But the Catholic Church still continues to believe that it is a bit too Aztec and Maya for modern Catholics. So you will find celebration all over wherever there are Mexican neighborhoods, but you will not find it celebrated inside the Catholic churches. Now, wherever Mexicans have gone, such as New York and elsewhere, they have taken their Day of the Dead holiday with them. The population of Mexicans in the United States is very, very powerful. Some people say there are up to 32 million Mexicans living in the United States, predominantly from Texas to California, where there have always been large Mexican populations ever since we invaded Mexico and stole these areas. Florida has a big Mexican population, as does New York and Puerto Rico. Other states, such as Illinois, New Jersey, Utah, also have large Mexican populations. And wherever they have gone, they have built their churches, they have built their community centers, and they continue to celebrate the Day of the Dead, very often sending back the bodies of the dead to Mexico to be buried in the family cemeteries, and sending money and gifts back to the family in Mexico to go to the cemetery and to entertain their ancestors, and especially those who have recently passed away. In fact, Mexicans are now the fastest growing ethnic group in New York. Some people say that the Mexican population in USA is only part of the real number because so many illegals come across. The official estimate for 2019 was about 11 or 12 million. Some people say it's up to twice that many. In spite of Donald Trump's attempt to build the wall, Mexicans continue to pour across. The economy needs them. Workers, construction workers, nannies working with old people. Without the Mexican immigrants and the Mexican workers, the economy in the United States would collapse. In fact, Mexicans are gradually growing even in New York. Now, most graphs, such as the one on the right, lump Mexicans together with other Hispanics. The one on the left, the graph shows the breakdown. Dominicans and Puerto Ricans are over 600,000. Mexicans are about half that, but they are the population that is growing most rapidly. There are another 137 million Mexicans in the diaspora. In fact, those statistics don't look very good. 31 million in the United States. I think that should be 37 million in the diaspora. There shouldn't be a 1 there. But it shows that 37 million in the diaspora. The United States having 131, almost 32 million of that. But large Mexican populations in Canada, Spain, Germany, Brazil, France, and throughout the rest of the world. I've gone to churches in Paris where they'll have an altar devoted to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And outside in the street, the Mexicans will be celebrating their Day of the Dead. So the Mexican diaspora around the world. I visited a Mexican church in Shanghai in China. So many young Mexicans are traveling around the world, settling in China and other places. First thing they do is they build their church, they get organized, and they celebrate their Day of the Dead. In fact, the Day of the Dead has become such a global phenomenon that UNESCO, United Nations group that recognizes cultural events and cultural places, ancient historic buildings. Also, the UNESCO has started to recognize a category of treasures to be protected called intangible cultural heritage. Intangible means you can't touch it. It's not material. And that is what the Day of the Dead is. It is a holiday that is celebrated around throughout the Mexican-speaking world and increasingly in Central America. And it is recognized by UNESCO as a world cultural heritage, something that should be protected. Another example would be Thanksgiving in the United States, a cultural heritage, a tradition with its own foods, with its own music, with its own forms of entertainment. And this should be protected as part of the cultural richness of the world. The map on the right shows how many intangible cultural heritage treasures are being protected. And look at the large number just coming from Mexico, more than the United States and Canada and any other country in South America, India and China, Germany, Italy, Spain, England also have huge numbers of holidays and other traditions, which the United Nations insists must be protected. So that brings us to an end of our discovery of the Day of the Dead. As the book on the left, a documentary, says, Day of the Dead is a celebration of life, not a celebration of dead, but a celebration of the new life that comes from death. Another book with text and photos, Day of the Dead, a passion for life. Day of the Dead, a celebration of life. So when you go to Mexico and you see these skulls and scenes of human sacrifice all over the place, you are in fact celebrating not death, but life itself. Only the Mexicans could have come up with such a rich tradition that mingles death and life, earth and heaven, and possibly hell. This is one of these treasures of cultural richness that even the United Nations has recognized must be protected. So if you have anything you'd like to add to this or questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at ronbrownmedia@gmail.com and I will respond. So I hope that you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope to have you as an audience sometime in the future. So once again, thank you very much for joining me, and have a wonderful holiday, the next one that comes around.